Lots of libations on tap and everything behind the bar. So make sure that you, again, come check them out over here at the number 38. Running it down here as far as some of the things going on with the Mile High Sports crew and with the Denver Sports World and News. CU had their showcase this last week. Coach Prime was out there lighting up scouts, causing headlines as always. You have the NFL Combine and the Pro Days. Pre-draft talk is all ramping up. So we have all of the content and the headlines going directly towards that. Playoffs are about a week and a half out for the NHL. In breaking news, though, the Nuggets, I think, are the one that's going to be spinning the news cycle around all the major circuits pretty much the next couple of days here. They just fired Coach Mike Malone. Yes, the same Coach Mike Malone who told LeBron, call me daddy, son. The same guy who hoisted the first NBA championship in franchise history, most wins in franchise history, most playoff wins in franchise history. He has just been fired within the last about 90 minutes officially as far as the news breaking. That's a developing story. We don't really have a whole ton of details following from that, so make sure that you smash that follow button here on the MHS account so you can keep up to date on all of those new bits of news that are coming out surrounding that. It's 9 games into the Rockies season, and they're already 6 games in the cellar. That's discouraging. I mean, we're literally eliminated from the playoffs as it stands right now. That's terrible. When is there going to be change over there on Blake Street? But again, make sure that you keep up to date with all of those sports headlines and news stories at Mile High Sports by following Mile High Sports account. Smash that like, share, and subscribe, whether that is on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, the podcast channels, the website, merchandise drops, magazine, everything in the mix. Make sure that you check them out there. Moving along to the Colorado Rundown, we've got a few shows coming up, and with a couple of new events that are popping up for their very first shows, one of them being Mountainside Grappling. That's going down this weekend at Novamente over there off of Oxford and Inglewood. Doors are cracking open at 2:30. Next weekend, you have Sparta with a Strikers Affair going down at the Eclipse Event Center here in Denver. They've got a full bout of striking fights, everything from boxing to kickboxing, Muay Thai, everything in that fold. So make sure that you give them a look over there, support those guys. Big shout out to Mason Sellers over there making his pro kickboxing debut. Love you, kid. We have 5280 Muay Thai fight series happening the following weekend from that. That's going to be on April 26th, going down at the Stampede. It's Muay Thai matinee. Make sure that you get there early. Doors are going to be cracking at 12. First fights are round 1. You have Guerrilla Fighting Championship announcing their first show that is going to be going down on June 21st at the Pueblo Convention Center. They're having an inaugural title fight in the featherweight division that's going down between Darian Robinson as well as AJ Robb. So a couple of Southern Colorado staples on the mixed martial arts scene. Big names coming out of Colorado Springs making their headline for that first show for Guerrilla Fighting Championship in a title bout there. Moving along, we're going to transition into the weekend recap here. This weekend recap is going to be covering a couple of events. We got the UFC Fight Night as well as CJJC 25 Grapple Con. Going to run through a little bit of this here. Some results as far as UFC card goes. In the main event, you had Lerone Murphy, who took on Josh Emmett. I thought that Josh Emmett was eventually going to potentially be able to find that right hand, but that's really all that he kept on trying for, and there wasn't a whole ton aside from that. You know, credit to Lerone Murphy. He keeps on figuring out ways to win. I do think that he's going to have to push the envelope a little bit more in order to encroach into the true upper echelon of the division at 145 pounds. We are talking a 40-year-old Josh Emmett that he took to a decision. You know, I said it last week that the big knock against Lerone Murphy is that he's a decisionator, and he went to another decision with a fighter who is definitely on the backside and really only has a couple of tools that you have to worry about. You got to worry about him blasting in on the takedown, which then ultimately sets up his right hand. I'm not trying to knock or say that Lerone Murphy isn't ever going to be a champion, but I think that if he wants to become somebody who is considered for that prestigious of an accolade, he's going to have to start taking some risks, plain and simple. In the co-main event, you had Pat Sabatini taking on Joe Anderson Brito. This was a fight between a couple of very talented featherweights as well in the process. Pat Sabatini and Joe Anderson Brito both have a high total of finishes amongst the two of them. Now, this did go to a decision, but that doesn't mean that this was a flop of a fight. This was a good fight. Pat Sabatini is a guy who he looks the part. He has tremendous submission skills. I'm not sure what's next or where he follows up in the ranks. I know that prior to the Ramos fight, he had been offered Chepe and declined it. Well, now there might be a chance that their paths collide again. Chepe got the better of him the first time. I know that Chepe's game for that fight. I'm in for it. I'm in for whatever matchups of these high level 45 prospects that are creeping up to the rankings. Eventually, their paths are going to have to cross. Again, I don't know what that looks like for Sabatini, but this guy has a lot of tools. He's had a couple of losses in the UFC. One of them being the Damon Jackson fight, but that's one where Damon Jackson was fighting outside of his body that night. You know, he had such an inspiration with the adversity that he was facing that I don't really hold that loss against Pat Sabatini. Sometimes there's divine forces, if you will, that could be working against you. Moving along from that, you had Chang Ho Lee finishing Cortavius Romeus. Lee fancies himself as, he originally said, well, I want to be the Korean Khabib. Then after the fight, he kind of switched up and said, well, I'm more like the Korean Marab. I want to be the machine. Whichever comparison that he wants to give, it was pretty well evident that he was going to be dominant throughout that fight. Next fight, you had Brad Tavares taking on Gerald Meerschaert. A couple of long-standing middleweights. Brad Tavares picks up the victory there. Next one, bit of a heartbreaker. You had Ode Osborne taking on Luis Grim-Goulet. First round goes really well for Luis. Second round, you know, sometimes you live by the sword, you die by the sword. In this particular bout, I think that it looked a little bit worse than the knockdown was. He was off balance. He had a foot in the air going in for the kick. That being said, you know, no point of contact on the ground. Does get dropped. Might have been stopped a little bit early by Herzog, but is what it is. Luis will bounce back. Sorry, folks. Frog in my throat. Next match from that, you had a split decision victory, which was certainly a head scratcher. That was Therese Finney taking on Robert Valentin. Therese Finney was a guy who faced a lot of scrutiny coming off of the Contender Series, saying that he had a very limited skill set and that he might not have have what it takes right now to be successful in the UFC. By that performance, I said it when he was coming off the Contender Series as well, that I felt that he was a one contract skill set type of guy. He's in too early. He needs more time to develop. That was kind of evident from this fight. A little bit more on that later. You had Diana Barbosa finishing Diana Belbita by arm triangle. In this particular matchup, this was the final affair for Belbita. You know, she's been around in the UFC for years. She's competed with some of the top ladies in the division. She hung it up and she says, you know, it's time for a new chapter. Next matchup from that, this was a doctor stoppage. Right from the very beginning, Reese McKee had Daniel Frunza's number. Frunza is a dog tough fighter out there, but that split in his lip, ooh. Especially when you saw like the UFC Dogs fighter post the video that he put up on social media showing that up close. Yeah, that was nasty. That was in the ballpark of Alistair Overeem against Jairzinho Rosenstruik, Robbie Lawler against Rory. Not good. Not good at all. Reese McKee, The Irishman picked up his first victory in the UFC, as well as picked up a $50K bonus for that performance. Kind of a long time coming for McKee. We first saw him make his UFC debut way back when on Fight Island. Unfortunately, ran into a couple of buzzsaws on that first tour in the UFC, one of them being Khamzat Chimaev. Fortunately for him, goes back down to the regional scene, goes on a tear, picks up a couple of wins, gets back in, did suffer another couple of losses, but then now, hey, good faith, gets himself back in there with a very dominant and exciting finish right there. Next matchup, you had Loma Lukbumi taking on Estela Nunes. For me, I thought that this was a fight that was pretty clear for Loma. I was kind of shocked to see Nunez's reaction to the decision being read out. She looked to be almost puzzled and, dare I say, upset and protesting the decision. Just, I don't see that. I don't see that it was in that direction. Following from that, we had the War Master product, Josh Barnett's pupil, in Victor Henry, picking up another victory over Pedro Falcao. Martin Boudet picks up a victory in the heavyweight division. And then you had a grudge match between Talita Alencar and Vanessa Demopoulos. There's no simple way to put it. These two girls hate each other. They trained with each other in the past. When Vanessa was out here in Denver and when Talita was going up through the LFA and then making her way into the UFC, she told me about how they don't like each other, how they had history. And then this fight gets booked. Well, you see the final face-off after weigh-ins on Friday. Then you see Vanessa get into Talita's face a little bit. Or no, she approaches the line. I shouldn't say she got into her face, but Talita's approach just kind of blowing off Vanessa and like, whatever, hands in the pockets, walking right up to her like you're nothing. Then Vanessa looks at her and says, I can't effing wait to punch you in the face tomorrow. Well, Talita blanked her. Talita gets the decision in this fight. And, hey, this was a matchup that Vanessa said on her side, straight up, hey, that sucked. I had a great camp, great preparation, great everything. Just didn't go my way. That is one thing, though, that overall, collectively, I got to say, I love about what we have with combat sports is that you don't like each other and you really want to punch each other in the face. You have a chance to do it. Gotta love it. Moving from that, we're going to go through the Grapple Con results from this weekend. Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club 25 Grapple Con went down at the Stampede over the weekend. Had a blast calling the show with Trevor O'Connor. We had a variety of different grappling disciplines on the show. High-level veterans all the way down through debutantes. Running through those results, we had AJ Fletcher winning a decision in the main event. Jacob Bark picks up a rear naked choke win. Alex Friedman wins by pinfall. Nick Lowry wins by knee bar. Josh Fremd, the Big Yins, wins by arm triangle. Michael Eager won by knee bar. Michael's about to be moving out to Thailand in a couple of days. Safe travels, my friend. Anthony Oliveira survived the theatrics of the Super Jew Micah Haas, who was probably the showman of the day, coming out in Hulk Hogan attire with the I'm a Real American song, did the full gimmick, the rallying up the crowd and Rise of the Hulkamaniacs, pulled the shirt off, everything in the process. Tremendous showmanship there. Anthony Oliveira kept his composure, gets the triangle victory. Brandon Skelton picks up a win via bow and arrow choke. That was our lone matchup in the gi for the day. We had Brianna Rice winning by armbar. Justin Scott wins by submission victory. Travis Rice won by decision. Kenzie Cassell, rising star on the scene. She won by arm triangle. William Roybal won by decision. Robert Taylor won by armbar. Blue Hernandez picked up the win by heel hook. You're my boy, Blue. Giovanni Valles picked up the win by straight ankle lock. Jake Richardson won by anaconda choke. Robert Mofnas won by triangle. and Michael Maisto won by heel hook. Again, a lot of very exciting matchups. And yes, there were a lot of finishes, but they were going for it. There was a lot of high-paced scrambles that, hey, when you're getting down and getting after it and there's limbs that are flying every which way, there's a chance that something's going to get caught in the process. Stick around after the break real quick here, folks. We're going to be talking some current events as well as the UFC card and closing out the hour by going 3 rounds. I'm Jordan Kurtz. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.
At Hooters, you can watch all the games with your buddies. All your buddies. Like the ones with ice-cold beer. And wings that'll knock your taste buds into next Tuesday. You know, buddies you won't have to fight for the remote. Buddies who know a thing or two about football. And the fans who live for it.
Where else are you gonna get all this?
Hooters, your official hangout for game day.
Welcome back to the MMA Plug, presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We're going to be talking this week's UFC 314 preview. This is going down in Miami. Lots of matchups that I think that fans across the board can sink their teeth into. You have fan favorites. You have a debut of I guess you could say an entire promotion's GOAT, if you will, or the best of the face of that franchise, along with the return of a couple of people. And yeah, let's get right into it. Starting right from the top, you have a title fight between Alexander Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopes. This is for the vacant 145-pound title. Volk lost this title to to Ilia Topuria. Devastating knockout. Heartbreak. Diego Lopes is hungry to go out there and get a victory. He has tremendous submission skills and he has pop in his hands. The one knock to Lopes typically is he's a sprinter. And I hope that in this case, I like Diego Lopes. But man, Volk is one of those guys that, especially after I got to meet Volk down in Jacksonville a couple of years ago, you got to love Volk. He's a guy's guy. He's one of the dudes. He grew up playing rugby. He was a pro rugby player and got into MMA a little bit later. So he just kind of has that one of the boys locker room type of vibe about him. He's friends with Jamal Murray from the Nuggets, so he spends some time in Denver here and there, and he reps Denver from all the way down under. You know, you could see him wearing Nuggets stuff all the time. All of those things being said, along with just the persona, the Volt cooking channel, all of those things, like he's such a fan favorite. He's one of the icons of this generation of MMA. When he got knocked out against Ilia, that was one of the few where you feel a little attached to it. You know, you feel a little bit of something about it, and there's a chance that that can happen again this weekend. And Danny, I don't know if my heart is prepared for it. This is a situation where Volk is on the heels of 2 knockout losses. First one being the head kick knockout loss in the short notice fill-in fight for the 155-pound title against Islam Makhachev in that rematch. The next one being the loss to Ilia, which I felt was too soon for him to get back in and fight again. Volk himself has came out and acknowledged where he says, I can understand where people might be saying that I'm done. That's 2 devastating knockouts. I'm on the wrong side of father time now at 36. I do think, though, that if Volk can get past that 7.5-minute mark in this fight, the chances of him reclaiming that title grow higher and higher by the second. That all being said, when you have someone who has the power the way that Diego Lopes has, there is the potential that things can end on any given strike. We'll see how that plays out. In the co-main event, you have Michael Chandler taking on Patty the Batty Pimblett, number 7 versus number 12, respectively, in that lightweight division. Michael Chandler, He's the guy who has so many tools, but he just fights like an absolute dunce. Like, you go and put that cone hat on him and sit him in a chair in an elementary room, and that is him right there. Like, my man, you were a top tier NCAA wrestler that you hardly ever use your grappling. You have the ability to blend at a level that a lot of your peers do not, and you choose not to. You choose the "are you not entertained" route, and that's why you continue to get some of the big opportunities that you do. But after a while, when you're not putting W's on the board, those exciting performances only go so far, right? Now that he's approaching the latter stages of his 30s, after a couple of years away from the whole Connor debacle, him going in there against Patty, this is the best chance at a winnable fight that he has right now. But again, I don't think that it's an easy fight for him. I think that Patty has a lot of potential. I don't know that Patty has UFC title potential, but he is continuing to get better with every performance. I don't like that Patty still keeps his chin high in a lot of striking exchanges. That could be where we see that big overhand bomb from Michael Chandler find its mark. If Michael Chandler wins, I do believe that that's how it is. I believe that Michael Chandler wins by knockout, even though Scottish don't get knocked out, might. I think that this could be the opportunity where we finally see that, if you will. In the next fight, you have a featherweight matchup, and this is interesting just because you have somebody who, if you were to say, well, Michael Chandler, wasn't he the face of the Bellator promotion? Wasn't he their franchise guy? Well, I would say if you were to offer anybody else who's a counter to Michael Chandler, especially because Michael Chandler wasn't there all the way through the end, the way that this guy was, even though they both fought each other a couple of times. You have Patricio Pitbull. He's making his UFC debut, and he's going to be taking on Yair Rodriguez. A styles clash that is so fan-friendly that this alone, I mean, yeah, this is a feature fight on this pay-per-view card, but you could have put this as a headliner on any fight night card, and that'll pack an arena. One of the most successful champions in Bellator history across multiple divisions in Pitbull, a 45 and a 55 champion, also tried for a 35, didn't succeed. But again, someone who was that highly regarded that, hey, that we want to see, can we give you the nod of the first 3-division champion promotion history? That's what they thought of him over there. Let's see what he can do over here in the mix with somebody like Yair, who Yair's kicking game is arguably one of the top, I would say, top 5 for sure in UFC history. Of this era right now, he's for sure a top 5 kicker. And the style in which he throws them, or just the diversity within his striking alone, I think is he's a fun fighter to watch. He's fiery. He's got a spirit that never says die. And I'm ready to see this fight this weekend. You have two guys who are ready to go meet in the middle, and whoever falls, falls. A matchup following that, this one is definitely going to have a lot of eyeballs on it for a lot of reasons that were started outside of the cage. And one of these two combatants definitely stepped in a big pile of doo-doo, to say the least. You have number 13 ranked featherweight Bryce Mitchell taking on Gene Lord Silva. Bryce Mitchell obviously had the Hitler comments a few weeks back on his podcast that drew mass criticism across all platforms. This is kind of in a way like people were asking, well, is the UFC going to punish him? Is the UFC going to take any sort of action? The UFC has always held a pretty free speech stance, but the way that they police that is the most menacing prospect on the rise in the division right now. Well, yeah, we're not gonna be punitive to you in the sense that we're gonna shelf you, we're gonna suspend you, we're gonna cut you, anything along those lines. Because from a capitalistic standpoint, then we don't make money off of you, and we're not making money off of your controversy. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in there against a guy who is tearing through everybody right now. And we'll see if you get your comeuppance in that form. That's what the UFC is doing. That's what they're doing by giving him Gene Silva right now. I think that the press conference this week is going to be a little more telling to see exactly where Bryce's head is at. We spoke to it a few weeks ago after the last time when they had their face-to-face confrontation that Bryce felt like he was having to battle demons following that John Silva was possessed. Again, Bryce is out there for sure. At the same time, that redneck sumbitch doesn't care who you are. He will go out there and he will fight you to his last breath. Because he has that never say die type of attitude, he has that crazy cowboy redneck in him. He's a live dog in any fight. Does he have skills that are not up to par with where I believe John Silva is in terms of striking? Sure. You could absolutely say that with the way that John Silva has tore through and knocked out striking specialists the way that he has across multiple weight divisions. I don't know that I can say that Silva has the grappling that Bryce does. Bryce is a little bit awkward. Let's look back at some of the people that Bryce has fought and he had some success with at certain points of that fight, such as Ilia Topuria. Yeah, I know everybody's going to point at, well, look what happened against Josh Emmett when he got knocked out and seized right there in the cage. Yes, I understand. I get it. Very, very valid when it comes to where Bryce's striking is at in relation to against a powerful pugilist like Silva. Noted. Ilia is just as powerful, and Bryce was able to get into some takedown entries and was able to grapple with him throughout parts of that fight. Bryce is going to have to be like a wet blanket in this. I don't know that he's able to do it for 15. If we're being completely honest, if you're trying to find your value here, yeah, there's probably going to be a lot more upside to John Silva getting him out of there. Because when we look at it just from the balance of the equation, Bryce has to be defensively sound for 15. Silva has to be accurate for 1. Or like in the case here in Denver, just maybe not even enough to put you out, but do enough just to cut you open. The way like he did with our friend of the program and Denver staple and Drew Dober. The elbows, the punches, the brutal violence of the Fighting Nerds product in the cage. He doesn't have to finish you or put you out, I should say, to finish you. He can cut you open that badly to where, okay, we're going to get the doctors in here. We're going to see what's what. And there you have it. Opening up the main card, you have the return of Nikita Krylov. He hasn't been in action since 2023, making his return against Dominic Reyes, putting his number 8 ranking up to the test against Dominic's number 11. Dominic has had a bit of a resurgence in his last couple of fights. He got knocked out for those 3 in a row where we all thought, you know what, he's done. Put a fork in him. The brain is toast, so on and so forth. Has a couple of successful fights, picks up a couple of victories, is riding some momentum right now coming into this matchup with Krylov. Krylov is another explosive striker, though, that when we're talking 2 vets at 205, especially if they decide to let it go, either one of them can finish it on one single strike. I would argue to say that Dominic Reyes is the more athletic overall of the two, but it's so tough to forecast what might actually go down once the cage doors are locked, just given that we have so many unanswered questions when it comes to Krylov. Unfortunately, as we're recording this right now, it's on a Tuesday, so we don't get any of the insight for him from Media Day, which is going to happen tomorrow, Wednesday of fight week. That'll be something that you can keep up on, more tabs up to date through any of those Media Day interviews and whatnot, just to maybe get a little bit more insight as to exactly where Krylov is at. Main event of the prelims. This is a featherweight matchup that has excitement written all over it. You have Dan 50K Ige taking on Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson has been on a run lately, an alien of the division, if you will, some of the craziest dimensions. I mean, Sean Woodson's torso is as big as this water bottle, but he's the tallest featherweight in the division. Like, it's crazy. The guy has just alien-like dimensions. He's so hard to get in on a takedown because his legs are so tall and his hip height. He's able to keep you at range with his jab because he's got such a reach. Former pro boxer, has had exciting finishes throughout the course of his career, one-hitter quitters. Dan Ige on the flip side, Dan Ige has brass balls that you have to carry by a dump truck half the time. I mean, we're talking about the guy who last year for International Fight Week hopped in on all of a couple of hours' notice. The only time that it's ever happened in UFC history, when he went out there to fight Diego Lopes when Brian Ortega fell ill. This is a matchup that I think this is a big cornerstone, if you will, or a crossroads for Dan Ige as he's putting his ranking up to the test. Ige is, for lack of a better term now at this point, he's kind of a gatekeeper at 45. I absolutely love Dan Ige. He's a nice dude. Met him in Houston a few years ago after he fought Bektik. He's got a lot of talent. He's got pop in his hands. He's an exciting fighter, but I don't foresee that ever translating into being a champion. That doesn't mean that he is not competitive in the top ranks of the division on any given night. I just think when we're talking about those tops of the top, the cream of the crop guys, he's just a tier right below that. He can mix it up with any of them, but I don't know that on a consistent basis, if we're looking at him picking up dubs on the regular. However, I do think that he picks up the win this weekend against Sean Woodson. You have a top-ranked matchup in the women's strawweight division. You have Yan Xiaonan of China taking on Virna Jandiroba of Brazil. Now, Jandiroba, she's on the outside looking in of a title shot, but I also understand where her thought process is that, you know what, I probably need to take one more to make myself undeniable. Zhang Weili is kind of out there in limbo just simply because of the situation at 125. Should Valentina Shevchenko get through Manon Fiore in a couple of weeks, I think that the direction that the UFC is going is that there will be a super fight lined up between Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko, which could potentially leave this 115-pound division with a vacant title situation. If that's the case, Jandiroba certainly puts herself in position to fight for those honors. And if she goes out there and beats the number one contender, obviously she's putting herself in line for that next title fight as well. Yan Xiaonan, alpha male product, solid with her boxing, good wrestling. Virna Jandiroba, though, she has grown with each fight. At first, when she came into the UFC, her striking was a liability. But she's grown and grown. She's one of the most accomplished female grapplers on the roster. She just doesn't have the same sort of look or marketability, let's just call it for what it is, as somebody like like Mackenzie Dern. On paper, she's got a lot of grappling accolades that are within the same ballpark, but she kind of looks like Raul Rosas Jr.'s sister. So make of that what you will when it comes to the marketability. That all being said, if she gets her hands on anybody and you get tied up and brought down to the canvas, you are in very serious oh crap territory. And you better be doing absolutely everything that you can to wrestle up and work yourself back up to the feet so that you are not in any sort of threat, because she's threatening with submissions from the top. She's threatening with submissions from her guard. She can go after the legs. She will invert. She has threats absolutely everywhere. You do not want to be within that tight of quarters where Jandiroba can get her hands on you. She's going to come out there. She's going to have the knee sleeves on to try to be a little bit more sticky and have a little bit of extra grip with the legs in the process. I don't expect anything other than her trying to go out there and get this fight down to the canvas. She's probably going to use a little bit of striking to open up the blend. She'll welcome the takedown attempt from Yan Xiaonan. And I think that this could be a very good coming out party here for Virna Jandiroba. The next fight, this one is a matchup between a couple of lightweights. One of them, the most storied or the longest tenure in all of the UFC. You have the Iron Man. You have Jim A10 Miller, who is approaching 50 fights with the UFC. Not there yet, but that's his goal, is to eventually have 50. Taking on Chase Hooper. Chase Hooper, a young rising prospect who made his way into the UFC by way of the Contender Series, started off in the 145-pound division, has put on some man muscle, has moved his way into 155 pounds, and he's looked good since he's moved up. His first couple of losses that he took at 45, and I mean, even in a couple of the wins that he had, he came into the UFC at, I believe, 20 when he first entered, as one of the youngest guys on the entire roster, and he was largely a jiu-jitsu specialist. He got beat on a little bit, and even in a couple of his wins, he took some damage in those contests that he thought, man, hopefully this kid can figure it out on the feet so he's not such a liability and taking so many shots. And he has. He's gotten better. Is he anything that's toward that top side of the 155-pound division? By all means, no. But there has been measurable improvement. Jim Miller on the flip side, we know what Jim Miller is. Jim Miller is the Iron Man. He's that dog. And as long as he's staying healthy and in the mix and competitive, they're keeping him around because he's a good company man. He fights his butt off every single time that he gets in there. He's a great advocate for the sport. Both him and his brother Dan Miller have been around combat sports for decades now and have helped foster the careers of so many underneath them. This is definitely, though, the young bull versus the old dog. So we'll see how this one goes. Following from that, this is a matchup between a couple of grizzled veterans who they don't know easy fights. And especially by the track record of them being some journeymen at this stage, they're not going to be given easy opportunities. It's either going to be a prospect that is someone the promotion is trying to build a name off of, or they're going to be in there with another dog-fighting grizzled veteran that they want to see a blood and guts type of war. And that's what this matchup is. You have Darren the Damage Elkins taking on Julian Juicy J. Arosa. Darren Elkins has one of the most savage comeback fights ever in UFC history. I mean, he has one of the worst tattoos ever as well in UFC history that literally says his nickname across his chest, The Damage, and it looks like it was damaging to his body while taking that tattoo. But again, that's the type of guy who you walk down the street to the factory right over here from Rhino, the canning factory or whatever else, there's a Darren Elkins right over there. Darren Elkins is a dude who came right off the factory line working a shift and just happened to be so dog tough that he could take a beating from some of the best dudes in the world. And once they got tired and punched themselves out, he was able to then start going to work and built a skill set off of that. And then now has had a long tenured run within the UFC. Julian Erosa has had multiple tours in the UFC himself. He got a victory here in Denver against Christian Rodriguez over the summertime. Guy who can mix it up on the feet, as well as has a wide range of submissions on his resume. I think that the better bet for this fight is if Juicy J can get this down to the canvas. The uglier the fight gets, the more it favors Darren Elkins. And if you're Julian and you have the ability to potentially find a sub or out grapple him, why not? Just another to mention on the way out here before we head to before we head out to another segment here. On the Fight Pass prelims, we got 4 fights. Danny, we got our buddy, old dumbass. He's kicking off. He's going to be on the end of the Fight Pass prelims. To me, again, this is another one where people always ask, well, how is he still employed by the UFC after his criminal history and his record? You put him in there against guys like Michael Olachechik, who has power punching boxing, who has the ability to put your lights out. That's why he's still in the mix, or that's why, hey, if he's going to be out there and he's going to be drawing headlines and stirring drama that at least puts some eyes on the product, well, we're not going to go let whatever other promotion make some money off of this guy. Let's wait until everything has been juiced out of him. Let's let him take those losses here, and let's capitalize ourselves from it. I think that collectively the fan base as a whole is rooting for Michael Olachechik in this fight. Sumaderji taking on Mitch Raposo. Mitch Raposo is a kid who made his way originally up through the UFC, or excuse me, through the Ultimate Fighter. Didn't get signed directly off the show, but back down on the regional scene, picked up some wins, gets into the UFC. This is his second fight now there. I look forward to seeing what this young kid has. You know, he's got a bright potential. Has been someone who has had the goal of being a top fighter in the UFC since he was a kid. This is that generation of fighters, these kids who are in their young 20s getting into the UFC. They've had this for their whole life. This is something that some of them have been working towards since they were knee high to a grasshopper. You have Tresean Gore, another product of the Ultimate Fighter, making his way into the cage, taking on Marco Tulio. Tresean Gore he's had some unfortunate setbacks throughout his career, multiple very devastating injuries that he's had to have some surgeries and some time away from the cage. Someone, though, that the UFC has obviously got has some stock in from all of the time from Tough to what they've stuck with him for throughout this time frame. It'll be interesting to see. He's got a very stiff test. Marco is 13-1. Definitely going to be going in there to look forward to pushing himself further in the UFC. And then we have the return of all hail Haley Cowan. She's taken on Nora Cornoli. Haley Cowan, she was a NCAA gymnast at Baylor, product of the LFA. She was out here in Denver a few months ago when the LFA was here and had the chance to talk to her. She said, just had to deal with some injuries and some other life circumstances to get herself prepared to be able to get back in the cage and to stay active in the process. So I'm excited to see what Haley is going to bring to the cage. I know at times there's been some issues with health and with the weight cut and all that. Cutting weight, plain and simple, it's way tougher for the ladies than it is for the guys. And hopefully this is something that is a smooth process and she's able to make the weight, doesn't have to worry about being hospitalized, any of that sort of stuff, and can be able to fight this Saturday. Moving along to a couple of headlines before we hit 3 rounds and close out the show. The boxing match that was supposed to happen between Sugar Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson, both 2 former UFC champions, both 2 guys who fought in the UFC, both 2 guys who were coaches on The Ultimate Fighter of the most viewed season in history. Season 10, the heavyweights, that was the Kimbo season for those keeping track at home. It's been canceled. Rashad spoke to MMA Fighting where he said that there were contractual obligations that went unfilled by the promotion. And he said that basically what it comes down to is that good faith was lost, that they would be followed through with all their compensation, especially when it comes to after the fight. He said that the thought between him and Rampage was that, well, they didn't want to go out there and because they both got in great shape. I don't know if you've seen either one of them, whether it's Rampage on the Jackson podcast, Rashad's appearance when he was on there, or anything that Rashad has put out on social media or them. Look, they both got into tremendous shape and They were taking this matchup between each other seriously, and that's in respect to the rivalry that they've had throughout the years. But what they said was they didn't want to go out there and get after it and, try to take each other's heads off and basically be not promised or be not guaranteed that there was going to be funds in the process or funds that were going to be delivered at that time. Typically, for some of these shows that are outside of the UFC, what that looks like is these guys will ask for funds to be put into escrow so that it's guaranteed. So once the fight is done, that money is for sure going to be dispersed. Sounds like that was potentially not going to be the case. Allegedly, don't want to get into hot waters of anything on the money side, but he said that it was for sure it was a financial thing, a part of it. UFC Hall of Famer Michael Bisping lands a new role in a gritty thriller titled Atlas King. This is an indie flick that's set to be sold at the Cannes Film Festival. In Atlas King, Bisping is set to play a hardened ex-fighter who comes back to town after years in exile to bury his best friend and settle an old debt. He's reunited with his godson, a street-level enforcer tied to a criminal syndicate. I mean, this is kind of a time-old tale of the fighter, resurrecting the story, the gritty, blah, blah, blah. I just love that it's Bisping getting an opportunity to go out there and just broaden his horizons. He's a Ultimate Fighter champion, former UFC champion, a fan favorite, a guy who on the desk, or I should say now is a fan favorite. Throughout a large portion of his career, Bisping was kind of hated by the crowd, but then he won them over in time and then now just continues to do so. And so, yeah, I'm glad to see that he's able to continue to broaden those horizons. Triple C, Henry Cejudo. Maybe we could call him Quadruple C now, add like cop or citizen cop or something in the mix. But he assists in apprehending a hit-and-run suspect. This last week, Cejudo was filming sponsor content with Dylan Rush while he saw a car that was driving reckless through the neighborhood and crashed into his neighbor's house. Suspect tried to flee the scene. His neighbor, who is a senior citizen, tried to stop the person from fleeing. That guy punched his neighbor, cut him open, and so Henry Cejudo went out there to intervene. Well, people are asking, what was Henry just that prepared? Well, yeah, that he was in his gold pajamas with his hairstyle and everything in the process, looking like a media op because he was shooting that sponsored content. But Triple C took him down, said he himself said he smacked him around a couple of times and then subdued him. Henry, I believe, is kind of dealing with a little bit of a shoulder injury right now. So he said, I basically did all of that with one arm to him and held him down until the cops came. Denise Obey at Octagon 69 over the weekend. This was a viral post-fight brawl that went all over the place. He got finished, and then his opponent, Max Holzer, kissed him and kind of humped him from the back after the loss, which prompted him to charge him, basically speared him Braun Breaker style right outside of the cage, and they landed on the concrete. Nobody ended up hurt in the process, but it was kind of a wild scene to see. Holzer was totally out of pocket. Holzer was absolutely wrong, and I don't blame the reaction. You can't. If you see it, you understand why it happened. Trevor Peek has been pulled from a UFC event after suffering a freak injury at the UFC PI. He said it sounded like a shotgun went off. So ultimately, he broke a bone in his leg. My guess is that there was a stress fracture that was already in place from training or checking a kick, something along the lines. He said that he had been jumping rope for about 20-ish minutes around in there and said he just kind of was tired and got a little bit reckless, going one leg to the other on the soft mats there. And he said it just sounded like, again, like a shotgun went off. Well, broke the leg the rest of the way through. With it happening at the Apex, there's really no hiding it or getting around it. So, yes, his fight was pulled. He's looking to get rebooked in the following weeks from that. But this is the thing, and Trevor Peek himself said it, if this didn't happen on their premises, he probably still would have taken the fight. This would have been something that he would have been able to mask and get away with after a couple of weeks, most likely. But, yeah, that's I think that all things being said, this is the best possible situation for Trevor. Get healthy, take the fight at 100, as close to 100% as possible. Now we're going to go 3 rounds to close out the hour. Got my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards. First round, what do we have?
All right, Jordan. Jessica Borga scored a viral faceplant KO to win the BKFC title over the weekend. Any thoughts?
Butt stuff on OnlyFans by day, bare knuckle boxing by night. But seriously, some of them backdoor all-star broads, they're tough and they know how to bite down and take a pounding. She went out there, she got that victory, and she got her hand raised. She's a veteran of a couple of the major MMA promotions, goes out there now, has a bare knuckle fighting championship title victory, I should say.
Norma Dumont vents on a very frustrating wait for her opponent and offers to be the backup for Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison at UFC 316. What are your thoughts?
Welcome to the top of the division, sweetheart. That's just kind of the way that it goes. Once you're at the top, when you have, you're in that top 5 sort of realm and you're waiting for a title fight or you're looking for a title eliminator, you have to wait a little bit longer than you do while you are on the rise. And that's because there are so many things that are going down or that have to be weighed out in the process. You have title fight that's happening at the top of the division with Kayla Harrison and Juliana Pena. I believe then the next beyond that, you have Caitlin Vieira, Macy Chalson, the other 2 top contenders in that division. They're scheduled to fight coming up. When there's only a few names ahead of you, and she said, hey, if I want to be active, sure, I could take another fight, but that doesn't get me closer to the title. Yes, exactly. There's a lot of things that have to play out in order for you to get that title shot. The only one ahead of her in the rankings that does not have a fight currently booked is Rocky Pennington, and she's currently on the red list right now, out for injury, and doesn't have a timetable for return. That all being said, Norma, it's just kind of a waiting game now at this stage. If you want that title shot next and you're waiting it out, might not be the most favorable thing with there being a couple of other contenders that are on the outside looking in for a title shot. But again, if she wants to go out there and make herself undeniable, then maybe you go out there and you fight someone underneath you in the rankings. You put them on a highlight reel and you say, yes, it is my time. It is my shot. Tough to say. Tough position.
After a particularly bizarre scorecard at last week's UFC Fight Night card, fans are clamoring for Judge Tony Weeks. Are their criticisms fair or foul?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's absolutely fair that any time where you have a case where it's a split decision and the dissenting judge scores 30-27 for the loser, it's going to raise some eyebrows. This is also what happens when you have a boxing guy judging an MMA fight where it's largely a grappling contest. This was the Torres Finney against Valentin fight. Tony Weeks, if you know who he is, he's a pretty recognizable face in boxing. He was the referee in the Badu Jack fight, the one that was probably the most notorious bloody fight in boxing history. If you see that image or that one where it's the referee and the blue shirt just completely covered. This fight had a great deal of grappling. I guess, kind of pressing up against the fence more than anything. That was the criticisms that were given to Torres Finney in the process, and saying that, hey, you got to do more than just push somebody against the fence to win a fight. This isn't the ultimate hold them up against the wall championship. That was even said on the broadcast itself. Another example, though, of why there needs to be more accountability for judging. Why there needs to be at least some sort of discourse as to why they came to that score. Why, after that bout and being such an erroneous total, do we not have answers for Tony Weeks and his process and why he came to that conclusion? I think that there should be that. I've said that many a times on this program throughout the years, and I think that that's one of the biggest issues with our sport, is that we have to go to judges who at times don't know their head from the hole in the ground when it comes to certain parts of the game. Tony Weeks has spent the majority of his entire career in boxing. You're talking 2 tools. MMA, you bring in the whole grappling department along with all the rest of the 8 limbs as far as fighting goes and the striking. I don't think that he is somebody who is best equipped to be in that position. But again, I'm not somebody who is a part of NSAC or who is making those appointments. But there does have to be some sort of reform at some point. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on having this same tired conversation over and over and over again. But just like that, folks, we are all out of time. We want to thank you all so much for tuning in with us for this original combat sports programming each and every week here with Mile High Sports. Make sure that you're checking them out across all platforms, whether that be YouTube, the website, socials, magazine, merch drops, and so on and so forth. Want to thank my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards, holding it down for me each and every week. We're going to be back with you next week, same time, same place. Smash that bell for notifications so you do not miss a drop. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.